Close your eyes. Imagine yourself as a kid again, and you're with your whole family in a small, crowded room in Syria. And as you lay there with your family, the air is dry. There's dust particles from the leftover bombing, and they're falling on your face, on your arms. But you feel the warmth of your mom next to you, and it comforts you. As you lay there, you hear men shouting in Arabic and guns firing from across the city. You hear the missiles being shot. And fear just indwells your heart as you lay there and listen. The fear of not waking up the next morning never leaves you. Fear and anxiety stay with you. All right, you can open your eyes. So the reason why I started off with the scenario is because we're going to be talking about the Syrian refugee crisis, and this is something that Syrians have experienced. And the college campus today is not aware of it. So I was in a class and we were given the opportunity to create a nonprofit. So I created a nonprofit for a refugee camp in northern Syria, specifically called Al-Hol. And at this refugee camp, I learned about the struggles and needs, and that just encouraged me to dive deeper into the issue of why there are refugees. And I found out that the reason why this crisis is occurring is because of war, and which resulted in poverty for the people. So we'll be talking a little bit about the effects of the causes of war, which is the revolution and the regime, and then we'll move into how that has affected the Syrian refugees emotionally and physically. So that being said, let's begin talking about how war has caused this crisis. Well, war is the major cause of the Syrian refugee crisis, and it first started off with the revolution. So in the beginning, Michael Kopech tells us in the beginning of his book that he published in 2016 how there was a spirit of revolt that was within the Middle East that was going around, and Syria just caught that. And they were tired of economically doing bad, and they were tired of corruption. They were tired of the secret police, and they were just fed up. So there was social media revolt going on online, and two young boys decided to go and spray paint down with Assad, their president, Bashar al-Assad, on their school. So they did that, eager the next day to see what's going to happen? How are people going to react? The police came and interrogated every student, trying to figure out who the culprits were, and they found out it was them, and they ended up getting tortured for weeks, and then finally returned back to their family. And this was the start of the peaceful revolution that was harmless turned into a total civil war that the regime pushed. And the regime started attacking the community, such as the rebels who were going against them. Bashar al-Assad, the president, came up with this slogan, and him and his regime came up with a slogan that says Assad or we burn the country. And Robin Yassan Kassab tells us that in his article in 2018. And from there, they are constantly going after the rebels by violently attacking them through killing them with guns, with missiles, or bombings, with torture, and with rape. So the regime started fighting the rebels. They started fighting the rebels, and they began, And Assad he had this belief that if we were just to kill off all of the rebels and all of the rebel supporters, then it would end. Well, he still has this belief. And according to Eyal Zisser in his article that he published in 2019. And also, Assad has been targeting all communities who are supporting the rebel movement, and they have been killing off their businesses, the schooling for the kids, and so much more, along with starving them. So now we see how a peaceful revolution turned into a civil war that has caused this crisis. Now let's move towards discussing how Syrians have been put in physical and emotional poverty due to the war. So first, let's talk about the physical needs. Well, Syrians have been affected physically because after the war, they've been displaced. So that being said, they don't have shelter, they don't have proper clothing, they're leaving behind their stuff, or their stuff has been destroyed, and they're fleeing to other countries and that don't have, again, like the water, that they don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to even food, and they're not, most likely not going to be having money. So these physical needs aren't being met. And then there's the story about Yasser and his family. Yasser and his family were from Syria, and they traveled all the way to Germany. As you can see, it says 706-hour trip. Well, him and his whole family went, so we can only assume that it was so much longer. Well, him and his family took this trip, and instead of going on land, they crossed the Mediterranean Sea. So that was such a dangerous journey for them, even more dangerous than where they are now, which is they're waiting in line in Germany to seek asylum. And they have been sitting in this line for several days now. They will sit in that line for several weeks until they can get asylum. And if you want to learn more about Yasser and his story and other Syrians' stories, then go to SaveTheChildren.org, and you can find this story there. But transitioning from physical needs, let's talk about the emotional needs. So there have been 5.5 million refugees who have been displaced around the country, such as like Egypt and Turkey and so forth. And there have been 6.6 million Syrian refugees who have been displaced within the country. And out of these 75, according to George M. Schmidt, 200 Syrian, and his case study with 200 Syrian refugees in Germany, 75.3% are experiencing traumatic events, and 24.7% have not. But with the statistics I told you about the 5.5 million Syrians being displaced outside of their country, that's about over 4 million Syrians who have experienced traumatic events. And if you saw the previous slide, again, think about over 400 million experiencing some sort of traumatic event. If we're just looking here, there is so much more that Syrians are experiencing. And he also tells us that 11.4% out of those 200 experience PTSD and 13.5 experience anxiety. Well, if we convert it, that means about 600,000 are experiencing PTSD, and about 700,000 are experiencing anxiety today. And I just want to add that, like, these Syrians are not living normal lives. Think about your life and compare it to theirs, it is not the same at all. They are not getting the childhood that they deserve as kids. So can you see that there's a problem going on in and around Syria? I hope you can. See, the crisis was caused by war and resulted in poverty. And Syrians are being killed, bombed, and tortured and raped by the regime, and it is affecting the emotional and physical poverty of the people. So imagine yourself as the kid again in the beginning of the speech. Don't you want someone to fight for you and help you? To help you and your family get to a place where y'all can be safe? Well, you can play a role in that. Thank you.